What is the worst possible human failing? The one thing that because of it, all of human society, God forbid, tragically is to be destroyed. We all know that the world was destroyed in the deluge and the flood. And what is the reason given? One word used twice in the context of the destruction of the world. Ki hishchit kol basar et haaretz, that everybody lost their way. Kol basar, hishchit, corrupt. 4 times in 2 verses in the beginning of this week's parasha, the world was corrupt. But what was the root of the corruption? Why? How could a world and society everywhere become so corrupt that every single person, heaven forbid, needed to be destroyed? And there's one word, a word we've all come to know, and indeed in our generation, as the epitome of evil. The word is hamas. It clearly says twice in 3 psukim in the beginning of this week's parasha, the verses, Vatimaleh haaretz hamas, the world was filled of hamas. And not only that, it says, Kates kol basar ba'lefanai, it's the end of all humanity for me. Why? Ki mal'ah haaretz hamas, because the world is full of hamas. Hamas, if that exists in the world has to be destroyed. What is hamas? Hamas in the Torah, throughout all the psukim, in all of the biblical literature, is used so many times and has come to be synonymous with the worst possible human sins. Everything which represents the corruption and perversion of society is hamas. But what specifically does it mean? And most of the sources point to the fact that it means stealing, it means gezel. I mean, stealing is terrible. It's one of the 7 Noach laws. It's terrible to steal. And even if everybody's stealing, that's terrible. But is it the worst possible thing? And I want to share something that I shared in a talk at the United Nations recently when talking about the perversion of hamas. That the Hebrew word hamas, we go back to the Bible, to the Tanakh. And of course, the word hamas, I shared the most ancient biblical commentator, Targum Onkelos, Onkelos the convert, over 2,000 years ago, says this. Incredible. Vatimaleh haaretz chatufin. The world was filled with hostage takers. When society is dedicated not only to stealing property, not only to stealing whether it be land or property, but stealing people. When people realize that life is so devoid of any sacredness that you can walk into another person's home or into the street or to the field and steal people, steal other people's wives, as it says. Take other people's wives, no problem. Take children out of their cribs and cots. Take other human beings and just steal them. When you can do that, that is the worst iniquity. And when society does that and supports that, society no longer has a raison d'etre. It's the worst type of corruption. Many of us didn't know the word in Hebrew, chatufin. Boy, oh boy, do we all know it now. Hostages. Still 101 hostages in Gaza. Our son, Daniel, deceased, unfortunately, is one of them. 250 taken a year ago. And not only taken, cynically, both Hamas and Hezbollah say they will take many more hostages. When you develop a systematic perversion that you can and will steal people, not prisoners of war, not people who you happen to take captive as prisoners, but people who you systematically, from the youngest possible child, Kfar Bibas, Ribbon Shalom, 9 months old, to octogenarians, when that is your war plan, when that is your societal plan, the society, the regime has no right to exist. That is why Hamas and Hezbollah have lost every raison d'etre to exist as a society. And more than that, it says in this week's parasha, the word derech eretz. Our sages speak that derech eretz, to be a decent human being, derech eretz, the way of the world. And it's something the sages use. But I noticed that the first time it's used in the Torah is in this week's parasha. It says, Ki hishchit kol basar et darko ala aretz. We all of humanity, lost our way on earth. Do you know what derech eretz is? It's our way on earth. It's something which precedes Torah. It precedes any type of moral complexity. It is simple understanding that certain things are beyond the pale. If you don't understand that stealing people and taking them hostage and then holding them ransom and wanting to trade in them is wrong, then no moral system is going to convince you of it. When that underlies your society, society is finished as it was then, and unfortunately as Hamas is today. So many people ignorantly support Hamas, but many people perversely, intentionally make a moral equation and equivalence, which is of the worst kind, to equivocate between Israel, who's trying everything to bring its hostages back, to defeat this murderous enemy, And unfortunately and tragically, sometimes innocent civilians are killed unintentionally in the desire to defend our lives and to bring our hostages back. And that, to bring any moral equivalence between that and people who systematically, intentionally steal babies, keep them from the youngest to the oldest a year later in God knows what type of conditions, to then trade in them. Hamas has lost its raison d'etre to ever exist as a society on this earth. And the force chosen to rid the world and society of this, that there should never be such type of corruption in the world, has been the Jewish people. The people have always been dedicated to Yisrael, to the name of God, to struggle with the values of God. Yisrael, to struggle, God, for the sake of God. And the Jewish people today in the Jewish state and all the incredible supporters, Jewish and otherwise around the world, standing to support light, to support those who believe in the sacredness of life and not those who tread in it, trade in it, and take human beings from the youngest to the oldest as ransom. That is the battle of what this is all about. And just as then, unfortunately, society of hijacking was destroyed, so too today Israel is committed to do everything it can to bring its hostages back, to destroy this evil regime, that the world should always know the infinite value and sacredness of human life. Shabbat Shalom.